told our players and I told our coaching staff that until they start winning some games in the conference, that's just the way it's going to be. So obviously inside closed walls or inside our walls and closed doors, our expectations are much higher than everyone else. But the proof's in the pudding. And until we start beating some teams in the Big 12, which is quite a challenge with the ability and talent throughout the league, we're going to be put in the same spot every year. And on that note, fair game.
Okay, we'll take questions for Coach. We got a question on the back left, and then we'll move over to the side.
Charlie, let's talk some football here. Tell us about Jake and how he kind of took control of the team this spring, what you saw from him, what you remember him when you recruited him when you were at that other school of yours, and where he's at right now.
Well, I'm going to kind of group Jake and Justin McKay together. You know, Justin transferred from Oklahoma back home to Kansas City, and where he's from, and Jake came from when I had recruited him out of Skyline High School out in Seattle, Washington, where he was the top-ranked player in the country, and he really wanted to come to that school I was at, but he thought I might get fired, and he forgot to tell me that he was going to be right. He had better foresight than I did. With that being said, I was very fortunate last year for them while they were going through a transfer year where they were ineligible, where they could establish a rapport, where they could be out on that practice field every day, throwing and catching, and I think that it's been well documented, anyone who watched us play last year, that although we had a pretty solid running game, we couldn't pass the ball and we couldn't score points. And I think that that's what I'm counting on, this year for us to be a more balanced team on offense. And I think Jake and Justin are two of the people that could help provide that for us.
We got a question on the far right-hand side outside.
Coach Weis, Sean Fry with Bleacher Report. You have Jake Heaps coming in, a quarterback who you maybe have some more confidence in this year that you did last year with that situation. You have Nick Harwell, a transfer, coming in, and then James Sims, who's obviously a good running back. With that increased balance that you have maybe from last year to this year, is that something that you feel like is an advantage going into this season?
Well, I think that it's definitely an advantage, and also better utilizing the players that we have. Like last year, even though we weren't a very good football team, we had some quality players at the running back position. That might be the only position that we had quality players as a group, but we've actually gotten stronger at that position than we were last year. So what that's allowed me to do is try to make Tony Pearson a more versatile player. As I sat there and watched the last 4 or 5 games of that Austin guy at West Virginia just tearing it up as both a wide receiver and a running back, I think that football sometimes doesn't have to be, as cerebral as some people try to make it. And I think that it's a copycat business, and when you can have a talent that you feel is similar to a guy that's being utilized properly, I think that if we can get Tony more involved in space, that'll open up a lot of things for the rest of our running backs and our receivers in general.
Got a question on the outside against the wall, left.
This is Greg Couch at Fox Sports 1. Can you talk about how junior college recruiting will factor into your long-term plans for the program?
Well, I think that you can't factor junior college recruiting to the number that I brought in this year into long-term plans. I think that the high volume of players I took this year was a necessity. See, when you go through a transition coming in and you dismiss 29 scholarship players, which I did, for a variety of off-the-field issues, not one of those players did I get rid of because they weren't any good. You can't do it for that reason. So now I took a team that already wasn't very good, and I made them worse talent-wise. So that led to we need to fill the holes right now. See, in recruiting, I think it's imperative to understand that when you bring in a high school kid, there's a good portion of them that need at least a year to go ahead and develop, at least a year. Sometimes it's more than a year. There's a handful of guys that are ready to play when they walk in the door, but that's the exception, not the norm. I needed guys that could play now, because if not, I'm going to be ranked 10th in the league every year. So I needed to go with that high volume, but I think that in the long-range plan and the plan that we've laid out as a coaching staff, that sliding scale should start working in the other direction, where the majority of the players you bring in are high school players, and then you fill the desired holes or gaps you need with those junior college players.
We got a question about 3/4 of the way back in the middle.
Charlie, you mentioned the record on the field last year, but you guys have still been able to maintain some momentum in recruiting. How are you selling these kids on Kansas, and what are you telling them to get them into the fold?
Well, I mean, the problem with me is I'm a very straightforward person, and these players either really like you or they can't stand you. You know, it's one or the other. And I take a very honest approach and a very practical approach, but I'll just say it as if it's your kid, okay? Let's say it's your kid. Okay, let's say he's a junior in high school and I'm recruiting him, and we're talking, and you're sitting in my office. I'll say, look, I got a great school here. You get a great education, great academic support. I got a great strength coach. Okay, my trainer's top-notch. All the facilities are on par with everyone else. Okay, the only thing that needs to be done is they need to do some work on the stadium, which are in the plans. I said, so all the background things I got in place. Now, what are you looking for in college? Okay, and if one of the things you're looking for is all those things, then I already have a good head start. Then everyone wants to play. There's no one that wants to not play. So I said, have you looked at that pile of crap out there? Have you taken a look at that? So if you don't think you can play here, where do you think you can play? It's a pretty simple approach. And either that's not a sales pitch, that's practical. You've seen it, right? Unfortunately, so have I. So now you're sitting there saying, look, you want to have an opportunity? Everyone wants to tell me about depth charts. When a kid asks me, well, what's your depth chart, or how many guys you're going to take? I answer the question and I said, let me give you some advice. Never ask that question again, because that means that you don't think you're good enough. So, really by being honest with them and just saying, here's what it is, hopefully before it's all said and done, before I end up leaving the place, that's not going to be the same thing I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying right now.
Question on the aisle right.
Charlie, last year, Dane struggled as a transfer quarterback, and now Heaps comes in and kind of a similar situation, but how are things better for him, and how could this maybe work for him, whereas it didn't work for Dane?
Actually, Kevin, they're totally different situations, other than the fact that they are coming in new. Dane was coming off of back-to-back ACLs. Okay, so you tear your right ACL, then you get healthy, then you tear your left ACL. So as a quarterback, okay, you could simulate a lot of things, but the one thing you're not going to do is in training camp let your starting quarterback get hit a whole bunch of times. So you don't know what's going to happen when the real bullets start flying. And I think that, we all saw, and Dane admittedly is too, because one of my favorite people of all time. I mean, it wasn't playing with a lot of confidence. Wasn't playing with that air about him that, I'm not worrying about my knees. I'm just going to go ahead and let it go. Jake has no physical issues. Jake just had to sit for a year while he was biding his time for his opportunity to play. So I think that Jake will come in with a lot more confidence than Dane came in, because I don't think health issues are even in the back of his mind, knock on wood.
We got a question on the middle, and then we'll go back to the back.
Kirk Bowles from the Austin American. Charlie, did you take anything positive out of the near upset of Texas last year?
Not much. when you give up a touchdown pass with 11 seconds to go, when you give up a 4th and 9 completion from your own territory, when on first down you have a ball thrown right to the corner that you don't intercept it. Okay? Yeah, here's the one thing I took. I was happy for Mac. I was miserable for me. And so, no, I took nothing positive from it.
Charlie, the kicking game was nothing short of atrocious last year.
Where am I?
Brian Baldinger right here.
Oh, hey, Brian.
Charlie, the kicking game was not good last year. What did you do this spring to shore it up, improve it, make it better part of your unit?
Change the kicker. That was a pretty easy one. Thank you.
I mean, what is he, JUCO?
Well, we brought in a JUCO kicker from California who has a chance of handling all 3 chores.
So punting as well.
That's his number one thing, punter and kickoff guy. But I agree wholeheartedly with your comment, though, Brian. I thought our kicking game was atrocious as well.
Got a question on the aisles, right?
Austin Meek, Topeka Capital Journal. Charlie, were you surprised that James Sims wasn't on the preseason All-Big 12 team after the year he had last year?
I think that James, once again, Austin, it comes down to winning and losing football teams. I think when you're a losing football team, which at 1-11 we definitely are ahead of the pack, I think you have to earn respect. And I think that if you have a player from a team that's been winning and a player from the team that's been losing, you're going to go with the team that's been winning because they've helped them win. Okay, that being said, I think that James, if you asked him the same question, would say, I don't care where you put me first, second, third. But he would arguably say that if you looked at our stable at running backs, you'll find a tough time in this league trying to find a group of running backs that's any better than the ones we have. That might be the only position I can say that with.